The evening lights of New York City sparkled like stars caught in an urban forest of glass and steel. In one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, perched 40 stories above the bustling streets, a young software engineer's heart pounded against her chest. The moment she had been planning for weeks was finally here. Mai had spent the last 3 years climbing the corporate ladder at one of the world's leading tech companies, where she had first caught the attention of the CEO. Their relationship had blossomed over late-night coding sessions and ambitious project launches. He was everything the magazine said: brilliant, driven, and worth billions. But to me, he was simply the man who got excited about new algorithms and could debate artificial intelligence ethics for hours. The autumn breeze carried the scent of expensive wine and fresh flowers across their private balcony table. Below them, the city hummed with life, unaware of the scene about to unfold. Mai had just led her team to a groundbreaking success, developing a security protocol that would save the company millions. The timing felt perfect. "I have something important to ask you," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The CEO looked up from his phone, raising an eyebrow. Even now, work emails demanded his attention. She had practiced this moment 100 times in front of her mirror. The ring she had chosen was unique. A band of platinum with embedded quantum dots that glowed with bioluminescent particles, a piece of wearable tech art that she had helped design. It represented everything they shared: innovation, ambition, and love for pushing boundaries. "These past 2 years have been incredible," Mai continued, reaching for the ring box in her blazer pocket. "We've built amazing things together, and I want to keep building. I want to create a future with you." She opened the box, revealing the softly glowing ring. "Will you marry me?" The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. The CEO's expression shifted from surprise to something colder, more calculated. He placed his phone face down on the table with deliberate slowness. "I've been meaning to have a conversation with you," he said, his tone reminiscent of his quarterly earnings calls, detached and professional. "I have a 5-year plan for the company's expansion. Marriage, it doesn't fit into that timeline." Mai's hand, still holding the open ring box, began to tremble slightly. "We could make it work," she said, her engineer's mind already trying to problem solve. "Our relationship hasn't affected work so far." "It's not just about the timeline," he interrupted, straightening his custom-made tie. "The board has certain expectations. For someone in my position, image is everything. And you're—" He paused, choosing his words like selecting code parameters, not quite the right fit for what the company needs in a CEO's spouse. The words hit harder than any system crash she'd ever handled. The ring's glow seemed to dim, as if sensing its maker's pain. Around them, the city continued its dance of lights and shadows, indifferent to the heart breaking 40 stories up. "I see," Mai said quietly, closing the ring box with a soft click. Years of training in maintaining composure during critical system failures came in handy now. "Thank you for being honest." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. The CEO ordered another bottle of wine, launched into a discussion about quarterly projections, as if he hadn't just shattered her world. Mai nodded at appropriate intervals, her mind already racing ahead, processing, analyzing, like the computers she worked with daily. She left the restaurant alone that night, the ring box heavy in her pocket. The city felt different now, colder, harder. But as she walked past the gleaming tech startups and ambitious entrepreneurs that filled this part of town, something began to stir in her heart. It wasn't just pain, it was determination. In her apartment that night, Mai sat at her desk, surrounded by the soft glow of multiple monitors. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she worked on her pet project, an AI security system she'd been developing in her spare time. The CEO didn't know about this project. He didn't know a lot of things about her, she realized now. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of possibility, Mai made 2 decisions. Tomorrow, she would submit her resignation, and then she would take her broken heart and her brilliant mind and build something greater than any relationship could contain. The proposal that changed everything wasn't just an ending, it was the beginning of something far more powerful. A woman discovering that sometimes rejection is just innovation's way of pointing you in a better direction. The morning after the failed proposal, Mai's apartment felt different. Sunlight streamed through her floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the coffee cup she hadn't touched. Her resignation letter sat in her sent folder, its timestamp marking the moment she chose herself over a shattered dream. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned coworkers. News traveled fast in the tech world, especially when it involved the CEO's personal life. May turned her phone face down, focusing instead on the wall of monitors before her. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with renewed purpose, diving deep into the code of her personal project. "If I'm not the right fit for his image," she muttered to herself, "then I'll create my own image." The security program she'd been developing in secret was unlike anything on the market. While other systems reacted to threats, hers could predict them using patterns in data most people overlooked. The next few weeks passed in a blur of coding sessions and instant noodles. May transformed her pain into productivity, her heartbreak into lines of brilliant code. Her small apartment became a cocoon of creation, filled with sticky notes covered in algorithms and whiteboards mapping out system architectures. When she finally emerged, it was to attend the annual Tech Innovation Summit. She hadn't planned to go. It had been on her calendar as an event she'd attend with him. But now, standing in front of her closet, she pulled out her favorite blazer. It was time to show the world what she could do on her own. The convention center buzzed with energy. Startup founders pitched their ideas, investors prowled for the next big thing, and the air crackled with possibility. May stood at her small presentation booth, surrounded by larger companies with flashier displays. But she had something they didn't: genuine innovation. "Your approach to predictive security is fascinating," a voice said, making her look up from her demo screen. The man standing before her had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a notebook filled with detailed technical notes. "I've been working on similar concepts at the University Research Center, but your implementation is elegant." Dr. Chen, no relation, they laughed about it later, didn't look like the other tech professionals at the summit. His clothes were slightly rumpled, and his enthusiasm was more about the possibilities of the technology than its market potential. As they discussed the intricacies of AI security protocols, May felt something she hadn't in weeks: genuine excitement about the future. "Would you be interested in collaborating?" he asked after their conversation had meandered through various technical challenges and potential solutions. "The research center has resources that could help develop this further, and your practical experience would be invaluable." For a moment, May hesitated. Her last collaboration had ended with her heart in pieces. But as Dr. Chen explained his vision for creating security systems that could protect not just corporations but small businesses and individuals, she saw something different in his eyes: not ambition for power, but passion for positive change. Their first working session stretched from afternoon into evening, empty coffee cups collecting as they explored ways to enhance her system. Dr. Chen didn't just contribute ideas, he listened, really listened, asking questions that pushed her thinking in new directions. "You know," he said during a break, watching the sunset paint the research center's windows golden, "sometimes the best innovations come from people who've been told they don't fit somewhere else." May smiled, remembering the CEO's words about fitting into his image. Here, surrounded by whiteboards covered in their shared ideas, she felt more herself than she had in years. Dr. Chen's research team welcomed her expertise, treating her as a valuable colleague rather than someone who needed to fit a predetermined mold. As weeks turned into months, May's security system evolved into something greater than she'd initially imagined. The collaboration with Dr. Chen opened new possibilities, their different perspectives creating solutions neither could have developed alone. They worked late into the night, ordered too much takeout, and slowly, without either of them noticing at first, their professional partnership began to shift into something more. It happened naturally, over shared challenges and celebrated breakthroughs. Dr. Chen brought her coffee just the way she liked it, remembered her offhand comments about quantum encryption, and looked at her like she was the most fascinating code he'd ever encountered. One evening, as they celebrated a successful test run, May realized something important. The pain of that rooftop rejection had faded, replaced by the quiet joy of being valued for exactly who she was. She hadn't just found a new professional direction, she'd found someone who saw her brilliance as beautiful rather than threatening. "What are you thinking about?" Dr. Chen asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Just that sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us exactly where we need to be, she replied, smiling as their hands found each other across the keyboard-cluttered desk. The city lights twinkled outside, reminiscent of that painful night months ago. But now they seemed to shine with promise rather than mockery. Mai had walked away from a billion-dollar dream only to find something more valuable, the chance to create something meaningful with someone who appreciated not just her success, but her journey. Spring arrived in the city, bringing with it the sweet scent of new beginnings. While her former company's stock prices made headlines, Mai found herself thriving in ways she never expected. The research center had become her second home, filled with the warmth of genuine collaboration and the excitement of breakthrough moments. Dr. Chen's influence on her work was like watching a garden bloom. Where she saw practical applications, he envisioned broader possibilities. Their security system had evolved from a simple protection protocol into something that could help small businesses defend themselves against cyber threats just as effectively as major corporations. "Look at this," she said one afternoon, pointing to her screen where lines of code danced across the display. "If we adjust the learning algorithm here, it could adapt faster to new threat patterns." She paused, feeling his presence behind her, warm and encouraging. "That's brilliant," he replied, leaning closer to examine the code. "But what if we took it further?" His fingers brushed against hers as he reached for the keyboard, sending a small shiver through her that had nothing to do with the office's cool air conditioning. They worked like this often, building on each other's ideas, their collaboration as natural as breathing. Dr. Chen never tried to overshadow her contributions or claim credit for their shared successes. Instead, he celebrated her achievements with genuine joy, his eyes lighting up whenever she solved a particularly challenging problem. The research center's annual funding presentation became their first major test as a team. Mai had grown used to boardrooms where success was measured in dollar signs and market share. But as she watched Dr. Chen present their work to the university board, she saw something different. He spoke about protecting small businesses from cyber attacks, about making security accessible to those who couldn't afford enterprise-level solutions. And none of this would be possible without Mei's innovative approach to predictive algorithms, he said, giving her a warm smile that made her heart skip a beat. The board members nodded approvingly, seeing not just the technical achievement but the human impact of their work. After securing their funding, they celebrated at a small cafe near the research center. It wasn't the rooftop restaurant where her heart had been broken, it was better. String lights twinkled above their outdoor table, and the smell of fresh-baked bread mixed with the evening air. "You know," Dr. Chen said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, "you could start your own company with this technology. The research center would back you." "I would back you." Mine looked up, surprised. "My own company? Why not? You have the vision, the skills, and now the proof that it works." His eyes met hers with unwavering confidence. "You've always seen this as more than just code, you see how it can help people." The idea took root in her mind, growing stronger with each passing day. Dr. Chen helped her develop a business plan, spending weekends going over market analyses and potential client bases. But unlike her previous relationship, where work consumed everything, they found balance. They took breaks to explore the city's hidden bookstores, tried cooking new recipes with varying degrees of success, and shared quiet moments just enjoying each other's company. Their romance blossomed like their work, naturally, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared dreams. Dr. Chen didn't see her ambition as a threat, but as something beautiful to nurture. When she doubted herself, remembering old wounds, he would remind her of how far she'd come. The moment everything changed wasn't dramatic. They were working late, surrounded by empty takeout containers and countless sticky notes covered in their handwriting. Mai was explaining a new feature she'd developed, her hands moving animatedly as she spoke. "This could revolutionize how small businesses protect themselves," she said excitedly. "They wouldn't need expensive IT teams or—" She stopped, noticing the way he was looking at her. "I love you," he said simply, as if stating a fundamental truth about the universe. "Your brilliance, your compassion, everything about you." The words hung in the air between them, so different from the calculated responses she was used to. Mai felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes, but these were different from the ones she'd shed months ago. These were tears of joy, of finding someone who saw her worth not as something to be measured against a company's image, but as something precious in itself. "I love you too," she whispered, and the smile that lit up his face outshone all the city lights visible from their window. That night, as they walked home hand in hand, May realized something profound. Rising from the ashes of her past relationship hadn't just made her stronger. It had led her to someone who helped her soar. Together, they weren't just building security systems, they were building a future where success was measured in lives helped and dreams shared. The corporate world she'd left behind felt like a distant memory now. Here, with their shared vision and intertwined hearts, she had found something real. Something that no amount of billions could buy, true partnership, built on trust, respect, and the kind of love that makes you want to be better, dream bigger, and reach higher together. Golden autumn leaves danced in the breeze as guests gathered in the Botanical Gardens glass pavilion. It wasn't a typical billion-dollar wedding splashed across magazine covers. Instead, the space was filled with brilliant minds, close friends, and fellow innovators who had supported May and Dr. Chen's journey. The decorations were a perfect blend of their personalities, elegant paper lanterns mixed with strings of fairy lights programmed to twinkle in patterns matching famous mathematical sequences. Each table featured centerpieces made from recycled computer parts, transformed into beautiful metallic flowers, a project their research team had surprised them with. "You look beautiful," May's mother whispered, adjusting her daughter's dress, a modern take on traditional designs, featuring delicate embroidery that, upon closer inspection, revealed tiny circuits patterns. The dress was exactly like their love story, a perfect blend of innovation and tradition. Dr. Chen waited at the altar, his usually messy hair finally tamed, wearing a suit that still couldn't hide his excited researcher's energy. His eyes lit up the moment he saw May, and suddenly, all the complex algorithms and security protocols in the world seemed simple compared to the joy in his expression. But fate had a surprise planned for their wedding day. Just as they were about to exchange vows, May's phone buzzed. Then Dr. Chen's. Then nearly every device in the room lit up with urgent notifications. A massive cybersecurity attack was threatening to shut down major financial systems worldwide. The couple shared a look, years of working together allowing them to communicate without words. Their security system, the one they'd built together, might be the only thing capable of stopping this attack. Some couples might have seen this as a disaster, but for them it felt right, protecting others together on the day they promised to protect each other forever. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Chen announced to their guests, "it seems we're about to witness a slightly unconventional wedding ceremony." Laughter rippled through the crowd as tables were quickly transformed into emergency workstations. May, still in her wedding dress, and Dr. Chen, his body now slightly crooked, worked side by side. Their guests, many of them fellow tech experts, pitched in. The Botanical Gardens' peaceful atmosphere transformed into a command center, with the afternoon sun casting a warm glow over dozens of screens displaying data streams. "Look at this pattern," May said, pointing to her laptop. "It's similar to what we predicted in our simulations last month." Dr. Chen nodded, already typing rapidly. Their security system, designed to protect small businesses, was now scaling up to defend against a global threat. As they worked, guests gathered around, watching in amazement as their combined innovation fought back against the attack. "Ready?" Dr. Chen asked, his hand hovering over the enter key. "Together," Meg replied, placing her hand over his. They launched their countermeasures, and within minutes, the attack began to crumble. Their system didn't just stop the threat, it adapted and strengthened the affected networks against future attacks. As the danger passed and celebrations resumed, news of their achievements spread quickly. Headlines that were supposed to be covering another tech CEO's latest product launch instead focused on how a wedding party had just prevented a global cyber crisis. "I now pronounce you partners in all things," the officiant said when they'd finally exchanged their vows, adding with a smile, "though it seems you've already proved that part." Their first dance wasn't the carefully choreographed performance most people expected. Instead, they swayed together, slightly tired from saving the world, but happier than they'd ever been. The fairy lights above them blinked in that same mathematical sequence, creating a magical atmosphere that felt perfectly them. "Not quite the wedding day we planned," Dr. Chen murmured, holding her close. No, Maine agreed, smiling. It was better. This is who we are, solving problems together, helping others, making the world a little safer. As their guests enjoyed the wedding feast, discussions buzzed about more than just the beautiful ceremony. Word spread quickly through the tech community about how their combined innovation had prevented disaster. Investors who had been skeptical of their focus on protecting smaller businesses suddenly saw the broader potential. But more importantly, every news outlet that covered the story noted one thing: the genuine partnership between the newly married couple. Unlike the polished, corporate power couples often featured in business magazines, their success came from true collaboration and shared values. Later that evening, as they cut their cake, designed to look like a circuit board, May caught a glimpse of a news alert on someone's phone. Her former company, the one led by her ex, was facing criticism for failing to prevent the very type of attack she and Dr. Chen had just stopped. Having any regrets? Dr. Chen asked softly, noticing her distant look. May turned back to him, her heart full. Only that I didn't meet you sooner. The reception lasted late into the night, with impromptu coding sessions mixing with dancing and technical discussions blending with traditional wedding games. It wasn't conventional, but it was perfectly them, a celebration of not just their love, but the power of finding someone who brings out your best and stands beside you as you change the world. As they left that night, under a shower of eco-friendly paper planes folded by their guests, May realized that sometimes life's greatest moments come packaged differently than we expect. She hadn't gotten the fairy tale wedding she once dreamed of, she'd gotten something far better. A true partnership, proven under pressure, celebrated among friends who understood their passion, and sealed with a victory that helped others. The morning sun streamed through the windows of SecureFlow Solutions' new headquarters, catching on the award plaques that lined the entrance hall. 1 year after the wedding that made headlines, May and Dr. Chen's company had grown from a small startup into a force that was reshaping the cybersecurity industry. Their office space reflected their values, open and collaborative, with small businesses' success stories displayed alongside technical achievements. Instead of executive corner offices, they had created innovation hubs where teams could work together, solving problems and developing new solutions. Look at this, May said one morning, showing Dr. Chen her tablet during their daily coffee ritual. Another small business had posted about how SecureFlow's security system had protected them from an attack that would have otherwise bankrupted them. This is why we do what we do. Their success wasn't just measured in profits, though those were impressive too. They measured it in the number of businesses they'd helped protect, in the jobs they'd created, and in the lives they'd changed. Their office walls were covered with thank you letters from small business owners who could finally sleep at night knowing their digital assets were safe. But the corporate world was taking notice too. Major companies were starting to realize that their old security systems weren't keeping up with modern threats. One by one, they began approaching SecureFlow, impressed by the system's ability to adapt and learn. The turning point came during a major tech conference. Mai was presenting their latest innovation, a security system that could protect not just individual businesses, but entire supply chains. As she demonstrated how small companies could now have the same level of protection as industry giants, she noticed her former CEO sitting in the audience, his expression unreadable. Later that day, the news broke. Several major corporations announced they were switching their security contracts to SecureFlow. The stock market responded immediately. While her ex-CTO's company watched their share prices tumble, SecureFlow's value soared. Did you see the latest market reports? One of their team members asked during lunch. We're now valued higher than some of the traditional security firms that have been around for decades. May just smiled, remembering a time when she had thought her worth was tied to fitting someone else's image of success. Now she knew better. True success wasn't about market valuations, it was about impact. The real validation came from their clients. A small family-owned jewelry store sent them a handmade thank you card after SecureFlow's system stopped a sophisticated cyber attack. A local hospital administrator called in tears of relief when their patient records remained secure during a widespread ransomware attack. These were the moments that mattered. Dr. Chen kept them grounded through all the success. He still brought her favorite coffee every morning, still got excited about new code improvements, and still made sure they took time to enjoy life outside of work. They would take walks in the park near their office, brainstorming new ideas or sometimes just enjoying each other's company. One evening, as they were leaving the office, they ran into a group of young programmers who had stayed late working on a new project. Instead of rushing off, they sat down with the team, ordering pizza and helping debug code until midnight. This was the culture they had built, one where hierarchy mattered less than helping each other succeed. The contrast with her past couldn't have been clearer. While her former company's leadership stayed isolated in their expensive offices, SecureFlow's success came from staying connected to their mission and their people. Their IPO day was unlike any other on Wall Street. Instead of the usual corporate celebrations, they invited small business owners who used their system to join them on the trading floor. Each success story represented what SecureFlow stood for: protection for all, not just the wealthy few. "Remember when you said I wasn't the right fit?" May whispered to herself, watching the opening bell ring. She wasn't bitter anymore, she was grateful. That rejection had led her here to build something that actually mattered. The media loved the story, the former rejected girlfriend whose company now dominated the industry. But they missed the real story. This wasn't about revenge or competition. It was about building something meaningful with someone who believed in you. One afternoon, they received news that their former company had lost another major client to a security breach. Instead of celebrating their competitor's failure, May and Dr. Chen gathered their team. "How can we help prevent these kinds of breaches across the entire industry?" she asked. "It's not about market share, it's about protecting people." That meeting spawned a new initiative, sharing certain security protocols with the entire industry, even competitors. Some board members questioned the decision, but May and Dr. Chen stood firm. "Security isn't a zero-sum game," they explained. "When one company's defenses fail, everyone becomes more vulnerable." As they walked home that evening, hand in hand, Dr. Chen squeezed her fingers. "You know what makes you different from him?" he said softly. "You never lost sight of why we do this work. It was never about the money or the power for you." May looked up at the city skyline, thinking about how different her life was now compared to 2 years ago. She had wanted to prove herself back then, to show she was worthy of a billion-dollar empire. Instead, she had built something far more valuable, a company that helped others, a team that felt like family, and a partnership based on love and shared values. The tables hadn't just turned, they had been completely transformed. Success, she had learned, wasn't about fitting into someone else's world. It was about creating your own, with people who shared your vision and valued your heart as much as your mind. Rain pattered against the windows of SecureFlow's headquarters as May reviewed the morning's security reports. 3 years had passed since that rooftop rejection, and life had taken unexpected turns. Her company had just been featured in Fortune magazine, not for its profits, but for revolutionizing how small businesses protected themselves online. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Her assistant's voice was unusually hesitant. "There's someone here to see you. It's the CEO of Maxwell Technologies." May's hands stilled over her keyboard. Through her office's glass walls, she could see him waiting in the lobby, the man who had once told her she wasn't the right fit. He looked different now, the polished corporate image slightly cracked around the edges. "Send him in," she said, catching Dr. Chen's eye across the office. He gave her an encouraging nod, knowing this moment would test everything they believed in about business and humanity. Her former CEO's footsteps were heavy as he entered, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked like desperation. "We need your help," he said without preamble. "Maxwell Technologies is under attack. The biggest cyber assault I've ever seen." The irony wasn't lost on her. Maxwell Technologies, the company that had once been her whole world, was now facing bankruptcy because of inadequate security systems. The same systems they had refused to upgrade when her team had suggested improvements years ago. "Show me," she said simply, turning her monitor so he could see. As he pulled up the attack data, she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Pride was a heavy thing to swallow. Dr. Chen joined them, bringing up real-time visualizations of the attack patterns. The situation was worse than they'd initially thought. This wasn't just a normal cyber attack, it was a coordinated assault that threatened to expose millions of users' private data. "Why did you come to us?" Mai asked quietly, though she already knew the answer. SecureFlow's reputation for handling impossible security challenges had grown significantly over the past year. Her ex-CEO looked at her directly for the first time. Because you're the best. Because you understand these systems in ways we never did. Because, he paused, swallowing hard, because you saw the future of cybersecurity while we were still focused on quarterly profits. May shared a look with Dr. Chen. They had built SecureFlow on the principle that security wasn't just for the highest bidder, it was a right that everyone deserved. Even former rivals who had once underestimated you. We'll help, she said, already pulling up SecureFlow's emergency response protocols. Not for you, but for the millions of people who trust your company with their data. The next 48 hours were intense. Me and Dr. Chen's team worked around the clock, ordering late-night pizza and setting up cots in the office. The attack was sophisticated, using techniques they had only theorized about in their research papers. Her ex-CTO stayed throughout the crisis, watching in amazement as the team collaborated seamlessly. There were no corner offices here, no corporate hierarchies, just brilliant minds working together to solve a critical problem. I never understood before, he said quietly during a coffee break, watching May and Dr. Chen work in perfect sync, finishing each other's coding sequences. This isn't just about business for you, is it? May looked up from her screen, seeing real understanding in his eyes for the first time. It never was, she replied. It's about protecting people, about using our knowledge to make the world a little safer. As dawn broke on the third day, they finally broke through. SecureFlow's adaptive security protocols not only stopped the attack, but strengthened Maxwell's defenses against future threats. The relief in the room was palpable as systems came back online, secure and stable. Thank you, her ex-CEO said, looking humbled. I was wrong about you, about a lot of things. May smiled, feeling the last traces of old pain fade away. Sometimes being wrong leads us to better things, she said, reaching for Dr. Chen's hand. I learned that the hard way. As they wrapped up the crisis response, Mee gave her former CEO a tour of SecureFlow's offices. She showed him the wall of thank you letters from small businesses they'd helped, the innovation lab where interns were encouraged to experiment with new ideas, and the community space where they taught free cybersecurity classes to local business owners. You've built something remarkable here, he said, genuine admiration in his voice. Something I couldn't have envisioned when I was focused on image and market share. The next day, as news of Maxwell Technologies' near miss hit the financial papers, Mee and Dr. Chen's phones lit up with messages. Their handling of the crisis had shown the industry that competition didn't have to mean cutthroat practices. Sometimes the biggest victories came from helping others succeed. That evening, as they walked home together, Dr. Chen squeezed her hand. You know what I love most about you, he said. Your heart is as brilliant as your mind. You helped him without hesitation, even after everything. May looked up at the city lights, thinking about how far she'd come. Victory doesn't always look like we expect it to, she replied. Sometimes it looks like being big enough to help those who once hurt you. They stopped at their favorite coffee shop, the same one where they'd spent countless hours developing their first security protocols. The barista knew their orders by heart now, one complex espresso creation and one simple black coffee, just like their perfectly balanced partnership. To bittersweet victories, Dr. Chen said, raising his cup. And to finding the right fit, May added, thinking how sometimes life's greatest successes come disguised as rejections, leading us exactly where we need to be. 5 years had passed since that fateful rooftop proposal, and the view from SecureFlow's new charitable foundation was even better. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a city that had shaped both heartbreak and triumph, but now held only promise for the future. May stood at the window, watching students file into the building for their first day of classes at the Women in Tech Innovation Center. The foundation, jointly created by her and Dr. Chen, was their way of turning success into opportunity for others. Ready for the opening ceremony? Dr. Chen asked, appearing at her side with 2 cups of coffee, a morning ritual they'd maintained through all the changes and growth. The center was their most ambitious project yet. Beyond just teaching coding and cybersecurity, it provided mentorship, funding, and support for women building their own tech startups. It was everything May wished she had when starting her journey. Look at how many showed up, she said softly, watching young women from all backgrounds enter the building, laptops tucked under their arms and dreams packed in their hearts. The main hall was filled with energy as May took the stage. 5 years ago, she would have prepared a formal corporate speech. Now she simply spoke from her heart. When I started in tech, I thought success meant fitting into someone else's world, she began, her voice carrying across the hushed room. I changed how I dressed, how I spoke, even how I thought about my own worth. Then one day, someone told me I wasn't the right fit for their image of success. She paused, meeting the eyes of eager students. It was the best rejection of my life. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but she could see understanding in their faces too. Many of them had their own stories of being told they didn't belong. That rejection taught me something precious. Success isn't about fitting in. It's about being brave enough to stand out, to build something new, to believe in your vision even when others don't see it yet. As she spoke, Dr. Chen watched from the side, his pride evident in his smile. Their journey together had been more rewarding than any corporate success story. They'd built not just a company, but a movement toward more ethical, accessible technology. The Foundation's first initiative was already making waves, a program that provided free cybersecurity protection to nonprofits and community organizations. Another project helped small business owners understand and implement basic digital security measures. But the most important lesson I learned, May continued, was about love. Real love, whether in business or life, doesn't ask you to be less. It challenges you to be more, to dream bigger, to reach higher. She glanced at Dr. Chen, remembering countless late nights solving impossible problems together, celebrations of small victories, and quiet moments of support through challenges. After the ceremony, they hosted a lunch for the first batch of scholarship recipients. Young women shared their dreams of building apps that could help their communities, creating educational games, developing healthcare technology. Each story reminded May of herself, full of ideas and determination. Remember when we could fit our whole team in one small lab? Dr. Chen asked as they watched the students networking with industry mentors they'd invited. Now look at us, May smiled, gesturing to the bustling room. We're building an army of innovators. Their success had been featured in countless magazines and news shows. That morning, a major business network was airing their interview. The power couple who had revolutionized cybersecurity while making it accessible to all. But the real magic happened away from the cameras, like the teenage girl who approached May after the ceremony, clutching a worn laptop. I was told I should study something easier, she said quietly. That tech wasn't for people like me. May recognized that look, the mixture of doubt and determination she'd once seen in her own mirror. Let me show you something, she said, leading the girl to her office. On her wall hung the quantum dot ring she'd once intended for a proposal. Now it was framed alongside their first patent, a reminder that endings can be beginnings in disguise. The right people won't ask you to be less, she told the girl. They'll help you become more. Later that evening, as they walked home through the city streets, May and Dr. Chen passed the old office building where they'd first collaborated. The security guard recognized them, waving with a smile. They'd provided his daughter a scholarship last semester. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks about what he lost, Dr. Chen said quietly, referring to her ex-CEO. May squeezed his hand. I hope he found what I found, that true success isn't about wealth or status. It's about building something meaningful with someone who believes in you. They stopped at their favorite rooftop garden, not the expensive restaurant where she'd once faced rejection, but a community space they'd helped create. Here, tech meetups mingled with coding classes, and new dreams took flight against the city skyline. To 5 years of proving that the best revenge is living well, Dr. Chen said, raising his coffee cup in their traditional toast. And to 5 more years of helping others live well too, May added, thinking of all the young innovators they'd met today. As the sun set over the city, casting golden light across solar panels they'd helped install, May reflected on how far they'd come. The rejection that once seemed like an ending had been the first line of a better story, one about building success on your own terms, finding love that empowers you, and using your triumph to lift others up. The foundation was just the beginning. They had plans for educational programs, startup incubators, and technology access initiatives. But their greatest achievement wasn't measured in dollars or headlines. It was in the lives they touched, the dreams they'd helped nurture, and the love they'd built together. Success, they'd learned, wasn't a destination to reach alone. It was a journey best shared with someone who saw your worth from the start and with all those you could help along the way.